I was living in a 39 a night motel room, eating cold beans straight from a can, when a knock came at 2 in the morning. The man standing outside wasn't the kind you expect to see at a place like that. He wore a $5,000 suit, polished shoes that didn't belong anywhere near the cracked pavement, and he knew my name before I even opened the door. Vernon Hutchkins? Yeah. If you're here about money, I don't have any, I said, half joking, half broken. He looked at me with an expression I couldn't read. Your ex-wife Melody doesn't know I'm here. But what I'm about to tell you, it will change everything you thought you knew about her cancer. Your divorce, and why she really left you. That's when my world, already in pieces, began to tilt again. 6 months earlier, I had everything a man could want. A thriving construction company, a home I built with my own 2 hands, 2 kids who thought I could fix anything, and a wife I'd loved since high school. When Melody got sick, I sold everything. Our house, our car, even my wedding ring, to pay for her treatment. I slept in hospital chairs, prayed every night, and thanked God when she finally went into remission. But the day she walked out, she looked me straight in the eye and said, "I want a real man." Then she took the kids, half of what I had left, and filed for divorce. Now, in this motel room with peeling wallpaper and flickering lights, a stranger with a briefcase was about to tell me the truth. A truth that would drag me through betrayal, revenge, and the kind of redemption I never saw coming. The man stepped into my room like he didn't notice the smell of cheap detergent and loneliness clinging to the air. He set his leather briefcase on the small table, brushed off the dust, and gave me a long, measured look. "My name's Richard Kavanaugh," he said, offering a hand I didn't take. "I'm an investigator, private, not police. I worked for your wife's oncologist during her treatment." That name, oncologist, hit me like a punch to the gut. I hadn't heard it in months, but it still brought back the sound of heart monitors and the sterile smell of hospital corridors. He continued, "I'm here because something about Melody's medical history didn't add up. There were irregularities in her files, missing records, and payments made to accounts that don't exist anymore." I stared at him, trying to process what he was saying. "What are you talking about?" "I sold everything for her treatment. Everything. I paid every bill myself," he nodded. "I know. That's why I'm here. You weren't just paying hospital bills, Vernon. You were funding something else entirely." I felt my pulse start to race. "You're not making any sense. What are you saying, that my wife faked cancer?" He didn't answer right away. He opened his briefcase, pulled out a thick manila folder, and placed it in front of me. My name was printed on the first page. Underneath it, a series of medical forms, wire transfers, and receipts that made no sense. I flipped through them, my hands shaking. Every page told me the same thing. The treatment center in Nevada I thought was curing my wife didn't exist. It was a shell company. "She was never a patient there," Richard said quietly. "Not once." I pushed the papers away, my head spinning. "That's impossible. I saw her sick. I saw her hooked up to IVs, losing her hair." He nodded slowly. "Hair loss can be induced. Medication, wigs, staged hospital stays. I've seen it before. The problem is, the money she took, close to $400,000, didn't go toward medical expenses. It went offshore." The room felt like it was shrinking. The humming of the motel AC turned into a dull roar in my ears. "So what are you telling me?" I asked, my voice cracking. "That my wife, the woman I gave up everything for, scammed me?" Richard's expression didn't change. "Not just you. There's a network of people she's tied to. Investors, property deals, and one name that keeps showing up on everything she's done since the divorce. A man named Jordan Blake." That name meant nothing to me, but the way he said it, calm, steady, like it carried weight, made my stomach twist. "She's with him now," he added. "Lives in Malibu. And Vernon, he's not just some guy she met after the divorce. He was in her life long before she ever got sick." For a long time, I couldn't say anything. The only sound in the room was the slow ticking of the motel wall clock. Finally, I looked up at him. "Why are you telling me this?" He closed the folder, slid it toward me, and said, "Because you're not the only one she ruined. And because you deserve to know what she really took from you, and why your mother might have been keeping something from you too." That last line froze me. "My mother?" Richard nodded, eyes sharp. "Your mother knew Jordan Blake. In fact, I think what she left behind in that basement of hers might explain everything." I didn't sleep that night. Richard's words spun around in my head until they became something heavier than exhaustion. Something like rage mixed with disbelief. My mother had been gone for 3 months. I'd just finished sorting through the last of her things when that man showed up. Now he was telling me my entire life. My marriage, my sacrifice, even my mother's death, might all be connected. By morning, I was standing in the middle of Mom's basement again. The one place that still smelled like her. Old books, lavender detergent, a hint of coffee. The concrete floor was cold beneath my bare feet as I moved boxes around, replaying Richard's words. What she left behind in that basement of hers might explain everything. For hours, I searched through everything. Photos, old tax files, a lifetime of junk, until I noticed a faint outline behind the furnace. I'd been down there 100 times, but never noticed the difference in the paint. It was a square patch, perfectly measured, like something was hidden inside the wall. With a hammer and chisel, I cracked the plaster open. My hands were shaking so bad I almost dropped the hammer. Behind the wall was a small gray safe, coated in dust. The kind of thing you'd never find unless you knew exactly where to look. My heart pounded. I wiped the dirt off the keypad. 4 digits. I tried the only code that made sense. My birthday. Beep. Click. It opened. Inside was a single envelope with my name on it. Fletcher. The handwriting stopped me cold. It was my mother's. I sat on the floor, staring at that envelope for a long minute before I opened it. There was a short letter, written in the same steady script I'd seen on every birthday card she ever gave me. If you're reading this, son, it means you've lost everything. But maybe you're finally ready to see the truth. I've kept a secret all my life, not to protect myself, but to protect you. The man you call your father wasn't who you think he was, and the woman you married, she's connected to the same people who destroyed him. I stopped reading, my pulse roaring in my ears. There's a name you must look for. Jordan Blake. He's dangerous, powerful, and has ties to something much larger than your marriage. I kept files in the cedar box under my sewing table. They'll show you how everything connects, from your father's accident to Melody's illness. Please be careful. Trust no one. The letter ended there. No signature, no date. Just those words and a single key taped to the bottom of the page. I didn't know whether to scream, cry, or laugh. Jordan Blake again. The same man Richard mentioned. I tore open the cedar box and found another envelope inside. This one full of old photographs and documents. Some were newspaper clippings. Others were grainy photos of my mother with people I didn't recognize. And in one photo, my stomach dropped. There was my mother smiling, standing next to my wife, Melody. It was dated 5 years before I met her. I dropped the photo to the floor, my mind refusing to believe what I was seeing. My wife, the woman I thought I met by chance at a charity event, had known my mother long before we ever met. That's when I realized. My entire marriage might have been planned from the very beginning. I must have stared at that photograph for 10 straight minutes, trying to make sense of it. My mom and Melody, together. 5 years before we supposedly met. My chest felt like it was caving in. I needed answers, and there was only one person who might still have them. Richard Kavanaugh. I drove to the diner where we first met, my hands gripping the wheel so tight they went numb. The old Ford rattled with every bump in the road, matching the pounding in my chest. When I got there, Richard was already waiting, sipping black coffee like he'd been expecting me. "You found it," he said quietly as I slid into the booth. I threw the photo across the table. "You knew about this." He didn't flinch. "I suspected." "Suspected?" I snapped. "You said you were investigating her cancer, not my entire life." He leaned forward, his expression steady. "You need to listen to me, Vernon. None of this started with Melody. It started with your mother." I felt my stomach twist. "What the hell are you talking about? Your father didn't die in a car accident. He was killed." The diner seemed to go silent all at once. The clatter of dishes, the hum of the jukebox, it all faded into nothing. Richard slid a file toward me. Inside were black and white photos, old police reports, and a name that appeared again and again, Jordan Blake. "He ran a medical investment company back in the 90s, Richard said. "Your father worked for him. When your dad found out Blake was funneling money into illegal trials, human testing, he tried to expose him. 2 weeks later, his car went off a bridge." I stared at the file, every word burning itself into my brain. "So my mom," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "She found out what really happened," Richard continued. "She gathered evidence, hid it in that basement safe, and kept you out of it for your protection. But somehow Blake found her again, through Melody. It all started to click. Melody's sudden appearance in my life. The way my mother always looked uneasy around her. The strange phone calls she'd hang up on whenever I walked into the room." Richard leaned closer. "Melody wasn't just your wife, Vernon. She was planted in your life, part of a cover-up Blake's people were maintaining for decades." My mind went blank. I wanted to deny it, to believe there was some mistake, but deep down I knew the truth. I could see it in her eyes the day she told me she wanted a real man. There was something rehearsed about her cruelty. Something too cold to be spontaneous, Richard said. She used your money to clean up the last of Blake's traces. But your mother's files? They're dangerous. If Blake knows you found them, you're next. I sat there shaking, staring at the folder. Everything I had lost, my house, my kids, my pride, had been orchestrated to keep me blind. Finally, I looked at him and asked the only question that mattered. Why are you helping me? He hesitated, then said, because your father was my friend. I owed him. For the first time in months, I felt something inside me harden. A purpose. A fire. Melody and Blake had taken everything from me, but now I had the truth. And I wasn't done yet. The next morning I packed what little I owned, a duffel bag, my mother's letter, and that file full of secrets, and checked out of the motel. I didn't know exactly what I was going to do, but I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't running anymore. Richard had given me a name, an address, and a warning. If you go after Blake, you go alone. No cops, no calls, no trail. The address led me to a sleek glass building in downtown Los Angeles, a place so spotless it didn't belong on the same planet as a man who lived in a $39 a night motel. The gold letters on the marble wall read, Blake Global Investments. Inside, everything reeked of money and power. Chrome elevators, imported plants. A receptionist who looked like she'd been trained not to blink. I walked straight past her, holding my head high, pretending I belonged there. My heart was pounding as I rode the elevator up to the 30th floor. The doors opened to a wide corner office overlooking the city, and there he was, Jordan Blake, tall, silver hair, eyes that never smiled even when his mouth did. He looked up from his desk, a faint flicker of recognition in his expression. Mr. Hutchkins, he said smoothly. Like we were old friends. I was wondering when you'd show up. My throat went dry. So it's true then. You knew my wife. You knew my mother. You knew everything. He stood and buttoned his suit jacket. Of course I did. Your father was a brilliant man. Unfortunately, brilliance can be inconvenient when paired with conscience. I clenched my fists. You had him killed. Blake didn't even blink. He made his choice, just as your wife made hers. He circled me like a snake, calm and measured. You think you were her victim, Vernon? You were her assignment. She was supposed to keep an eye on you, make sure your mother never passed on what she found. But your wife, he smiled, a cold, crooked thing. She fell in love. That wasn't part of the plan. My stomach turned. Love? She destroyed me. Blake chuckled softly. No, she tried to save you. Do you think it was coincidence she pushed for the divorce right after your mother died? She knew what was coming. She knew the files would resurface. And she left to keep you, and your children, alive. I couldn't tell if he was lying or if the truth was worse than I imagined. Every word he said cut deeper, tangled tighter. Why tell me this now? I asked. Because, he said, stepping close enough that I could see my reflection in his eyes. Your mother's evidence is incomplete. The rest is missing. And something tells me you're the kind of man who'll tear the world apart to find it. When you do, bring it to me, or you'll end up like your father. He turned his back, dismissed me with a wave of his hand. Now get out before I change my mind. I walked out, shaking, adrenaline burning through my veins. My whole life had just been rewritten again, but this time, there was something else beneath the pain. Resolve. If Melody had done all this to protect me, I had to find her. I had to hear the truth from her own mouth. Because for the first time since she left, I wasn't just a man broken by love. I was a man with a mission. By the time I left that building, the sky had turned gray, heavy clouds rolling in like a warning. I drove for hours, no destination in mind, just the echo of Blake's words gnawing at my brain. She left to keep you alive. If that was true, then everything, the betrayal, the divorce, even the cruel words she said in court, might have been part of a lie meant to save me. But why keep me in the dark? Why let me suffer when she could have just told me the truth? I needed to find her. The last address I had for Melody was from the custody filings, a gated estate in Malibu. I didn't know if she still lived there, but I didn't care. I drove all night. When the sun finally broke through the clouds, I was standing at the gate of a mansion that looked like it belonged to someone else's world. A guard approached, but before I could even speak, I heard a familiar voice behind him. Vernon? I froze. She looked different. Her hair longer, her eyes tired, but still that same deep brown I used to lose myself in. She told the guard it was fine, and he let me through. For a long moment, neither of us said a word. We just stood there, the ocean wind tugging at her sweater, the distance between us thick with everything left unsaid. Finally, I said it. You lied to me. About everything. Tears welled in her eyes, but she didn't deny it. I had to, she whispered. They were watching us. If I didn't play the part, they would have killed you. And the kids. My throat tightened. So you let me think you didn't love me? You let me think I wasn't enough? She looked down, trembling. It was the only way you'd walk away. If you stayed, you'd be dead. Blake doesn't forgive mistakes, and falling in love with you was mine. The words hit me harder than any punch could have. All those nights replayed in my head. The cold silences, the sudden change in her eyes, the way she packed without looking back. She stepped closer, her voice breaking. Your mother warned me. She said you'd find the truth one day. I didn't want it to be like this. I swallowed hard. Why didn't you come to me? Why not tell me once he was gone? Because he's never gone, she said, her voice almost a whisper. Blake doesn't stop. He has people everywhere, even here. I looked around, the guards, the cameras, the silent windows, and realized she wasn't exaggerating. She reached into her pocket and handed me a small USB drive. This is what your mother died protecting. I finished what she started. Everything Blake did, the experiments, the accounts, the bribes, it's all here. You have to get it out. Expose him. My hand shook as I took it. Come with me. She smiled faintly. The same smile I fell in love with. I can't. If I disappear now, he'll know it was me. You have to go. I wanted to fight it, to refuse, but deep down I knew she was right. I nodded slowly. For what it's worth, I never stopped loving you. She reached out and touched my face, just for a second. That's why I had to let you go. When I drove away from that house, my heart was in pieces again, but this time, those pieces were sharp, because I finally understood what I was fighting for, and I wasn't done yet. I didn't go back to the motel that night. Instead, I drove until the city lights faded behind me, and the Pacific shimmered like liquid steel under the moonlight. The USB drive sat in my pocket, small and cold, but it might as well have been a ticking bomb. Melody's words kept replaying in my head. Everything Blake did. It's all here. If that was true, this wasn't just about me anymore. It was about my mother, about the company she helped build, and about the lies that destroyed my family. I stopped at a 24-hour diner off Highway 1 and pulled out my laptop. The waitress gave me a tired smile as she refilled my coffee, and for a moment, I felt almost normal. Then I plugged in the USB. There were hundreds of files, contracts, medical reports, payment logs, a video file labeled simply, Project Mercy. I hesitated, then clicked. The video began with a hospital room. My wife, Melody, lying in a bed, connected to tubes. Blake was there, standing beside her, his voice calm and clinical. Patient number 72 responding to serum, he said. Estimated survival rate, 8.4%. Husband unaware of trial involvement? My stomach turned. Husband unaware? That was me. The footage shifted to another scene, my mother. She was standing in the same lab, arguing with Blake. This isn't a cure, she said sharply. It's human experimentation. You're using terminal patients as test subjects. Blake smiled. You were the one who came to me, Wilma. You said you wanted your daughter-in-law to live. I'm making that happen. Don't get self-righteous now. My mom looked furious. Not like this. Vernon can't know. He'd never forgive either of us. The video ended there. My chest tightened until I could barely breathe. My own mother had been part of it. She'd helped Blake experiment on my wife without telling me. That's why Melody had left. That's why she'd lied. She wasn't just protecting me from Blake. She was protecting me from the truth. My hands were shaking when I heard footsteps behind me. I turned and my blood ran cold. Blake, standing there in the doorway of the diner, wearing that same immaculate suit, smiling like a shark. Evening, Vernon, he said, his voice smooth. I see you found my little project. I reached for the USB, but he raised a hand. No need for that. I already have backups. Do you know how hard it is to kill data these days? What do you want? I snapped. He sat across from me, uninvited. I want to offer you a deal. You keep that drive. Pretend you never saw it. In exchange, you get your kids back. Melody keeps her life. Everyone walks away happy. My jaw clenched. And if I don't? He smiled wider. Then accidents happen. Like the one that killed your mother. My vision blurred red. I lunged across the table, grabbed his collar, and slammed him against the wall. Plates shattered, coffee spilled. The waitress screamed. You murdered her! I roared. He didn't flinch. She was going to ruin everything. You should be thanking me. Her death gave you the fortune she left behind. I wanted to hit him again, to end him, but something in his eyes stopped me. That cold, calculating confidence told me he still held cards I couldn't see. So instead, I whispered, You're going to regret ever saying her name. Then I let him go, because revenge, real revenge, doesn't happen in a diner. It happens in daylight, in front of cameras, where everyone can see the monster you really are. And I had the proof to do it. I slept with the diner coffee, and the memory of Blake's smile still in my blood. For a while I thought about burning the USB, stuffing it into the ocean and disappearing. But my mother's face, the way she looked at me in that old Polaroid, kept returning. She died protecting something that deserved daylight. I couldn't let her sacrifice be a whisper. Richard called at dawn. "We don't have long," he said. "Blake already knows you poked the hornet's nest. He's moving people. He'll bury the files or bury you." His voice wasn't panicked. It was laser-focused. "I talked to an old friend at the Tribune, investigative desk. They'll run a story if we give them airtight proof, data, testimony, and a recording of Blake admitting involvement. But they need it all at once. No leaks, no middlemen. A plan brewed that felt more like a prayer than strategy. Synchronize release, outflank the backups, and force law enforcement to move under public pressure. We needed more than digital files. We needed a confession. We needed Melody to show up, which made the next hour feel like waiting for lightning. I drove to where Richard said, an apartment above an auto shop where he swore a reporter named Maya would meet us. Maya was 32, stern, and smelled faintly of cigarette smoke and conviction. She scanned the files, her face unreadable. "This is real," she said finally. "And if you want me to publish, I need a recording of Blake admitting what he did. You have to get it on the record. Public, verifiable, no room for spin." "How?" I asked. Maya smiled like someone who'd lost a sibling to the same darkness. "He's predictable. Big men crave audiences. He'll be at the Kensington Foundation Gala tonight. Cameras, speeches, a chance to look magnanimous. We'll be there. We'll broadcast. You get Blake to say the words in public, or we hand the files to the authorities and every outlet in the world at once. But there's one more thing. You need Melody." My hands went cold. I hadn't heard from her since she gave me the drive. She could have vanished, changed her name, her life. I thought of the last look she'd given me that day by the gate. Exhaustion, and a corner of apology. Could she risk stepping back into that hurricane? At dusk, Richard called again. "She wants to meet. She can't come in person to the gala. Too risky. But she's willing to do one thing. A live video drop from a location Blake can't control. She recorded him months ago. Proof he admitted to using terminal patients, to staging my father's death, and to using marriages as cover. She kept it as insurance." His voice cracked just a bit. "She'll send it to Maya, but she'll only do it if we synchronize. Gala starts, Blake speaks, Maya streams, we release the files. One moment. The night of the gala was a chiaroscuro of polished shoes and whispered deals. Blake took the stage surrounded by cameras and grace notes. He smiled and thanked donors. He spoke of philanthropy, the sort of speech that brushed sins into shadows. My throat felt tight. I clutched the folded photograph of my mother until the edges softened. Maya's signal went live, public and raw. At the same second, Richard pressed send to 24 investigative contacts, a cache to the Tribune, and an encrypted drop to the FBI's special prosecutor. 1,000 servers lit up with our files. Social feeds began to shudder. Then Maya played Melody's clip. The feed showed Melody. Older, tired, visible fear in her eyes but steady. She spoke into the camera with a voice that broke and then hardened. "Jordan Blake told me in 2016 that human trials were necessary collateral to build a product that would make him untouchable. He told me he removed obstacles. He told me my marriage was a plan. He told me your father was a liability." The clip cut to a grainy recording of Blake's voice, casual, clinical, admitting we used expendables and laughing about coverage and offshore funds. The room gasped. Cameras panned to Blake. His face, for the first time, thinned. On stage, Blake began to stammer, then tried to regain control. But the footage kept playing, and at the bottom of every live stream, the Tribune's headline scrolled, "Exposed, Blake's Human Trials." The FBI's special prosecutor issued an emergency subpoena on the spot. Live feeds showed agents arriving, cameras rolling, Blake escorted from the stage. And then, for a beat that felt suspended in the center of the world, a woman in the crowd stood up. It was Melody. She walked through the press, her hair pulled back, and for the first time in months, looked at me across a sea of strangers. She walked to the microphone Maya held out and said simply, "I had to make it look real. I had to make him think I'd obeyed. I'm sorry for what that cost you, but I never stopped wanting you and the kids safe." It wasn't absolution. It was confession. It was the exact thing that burned a hole right through the middle of everything Blake had built. As cameras turned from Blake to Melody, something shifted inside me. Fury didn't collapse me anymore. Clarity did. The truth was out. The world had a face for the monsters my mother had named. The file my mom had died protecting was no longer a ghost in a basement. It was a headline, a warrant, a handcuff. And in the echo of 1,000 notifications, I realized the life I wanted wasn't to punish. It was to bring my kids home. When the news broke the next morning, the world moved like an avalanche. Every outlet from local radio to national TV was talking about the Blake scandal. The footage of his arrest went viral overnight. The billionaire philanthropist in cuffs, face blank, while cameras flashed like lightning around him. I sat on the edge of the motel bed, watching it all unfold on the small television I'd bought from a pawn shop for $20. My phone buzzed nonstop. Reporters, lawyers, people I hadn't heard from in years. But the only name I wanted to see never came. Melody. For 2 days, I didn't hear from her. Then, on the third night, a call came through from an unknown number. Her voice was quiet, fragile. "It's over, Vernon," she said. "They've taken him into custody. The feds have everything. You're safe now. And so are the kids." I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. "Where are you?" I asked. "In protective custody," she said. "But I wanted you to hear it from me first. I'm sorry for every lie I told. I didn't want to leave you. But if I hadn't, he would have destroyed us both." For a moment, all the noise of the world disappeared. Just her voice, trembling through the static. "You saved me too," I said quietly. "You gave me a reason to keep fighting." There was silence. Then a breath. "Tell the kids I love them," she whispered, before the line went dead. Weeks passed. The FBI's investigation grew deeper than anyone imagined. Money laundering, human experimentation, forged research trials, and murder-for-hire contracts. The truth was bigger, darker, and older than any of us knew. My mother had been one of dozens of people who'd tried to expose Blake years earlier, and she'd paid the ultimate price for it. But now justice was finally catching up. Then one morning, I received an email from Maya, the reporter. It had a single line. "Come to the courthouse today." When I arrived, the courtroom was packed. Blake sat behind glass, hollow-eyed, defeated. Melody was there too, under protection, flanked by 2 agents. She didn't look at me, not until the verdict was read. Guilty on all counts. As the judge's gavel echoed through the room, Blake's mask finally broke. He turned toward me with a look of pure hatred, then fear, before the officers led him away. The monster was gone. Melody approached me slowly after the hearing, escorted but calm. "It's really over," she said softly. "The kids are safe. They're waiting for you." I didn't say anything at first. Words couldn't fit the weight of that moment. I just nodded, tears burning at the corners of my eyes. She smiled faintly. Not the same woman I once loved, but one I finally understood. "You always were the real man, Vernon," she whispered. That night, I drove home. Not to the $4.2 million mansion I once thought defined me, but to the small house my mother left behind in Ohio. The air smelled like lilacs, and the lights from the street glowed faintly through the curtains. When I opened the door, my 2 kids were sitting on the couch watching TV. Quinlan looked up first, then Brina. For a heartbeat, they just stared. Then they ran. I caught them both in my arms, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I felt whole again. No headlines, no money, no revenge, just peace. As I tucked them into bed that night, I found the letter from my mother still in my pocket, crumpled, worn and stained from all the tears. I unfolded it one last time and read her words again. "If you're reading this, son, remember that the truth always finds light, and the people who love you never really leave." She was right. In the end, the truth didn't just save me. It gave me back everything that mattered. It's been a year since that night, since the truth finally came crashing through every lie that nearly destroyed my life. The papers don't write about it anymore. But sometimes, when I'm driving the kids to school, I'll hear my name on some late-night podcast, or see a headline about the Blake case in a sidebar. People love a good redemption story, but they never tell you what comes after the credits roll. What comes after is silence and peace. I rebuilt my construction company from the ground up, smaller this time, honest, with a crew that feels like family. The house in Ohio isn't worth millions, but it's home. The walls carry laughter again. The fridge is covered with the kids' drawings. On weekends, we plant tomatoes in the backyard. Melody writes letters sometimes. She's in a witness protection program now, living under another name in another state. Her handwriting looks different, but her heart is still there between the lines. She tells me she's proud of me, that she prays for me and the kids every night. I don't know if we'll ever see each other again, but that's okay. Some love stories aren't meant to start over. They're meant to end with forgiveness. The letter from my mother is framed on my desk now, behind glass. A reminder of how far we've come. If you're reading this, son, I finished the line in my head every time. Remember that the truth always finds light. And as I watched the sun rise over the quiet Ohio hills, I realized something I never understood before. I didn't lose my life when I lost everything. I found it,